The Canadian dollar is underperforming the US dollar since June and could continue to underperform for the next couple of months. If we go back and take a look at earlier in the year, we saw the Canadian dollar outperform the US dollars from January until June. It really was the US dollar underperforming relative to world currencies substantially. A lot of investors at the time were concerned about the impact of tariffs and pulled back their US dollar exposure. And we saw the US dollar have its worst first half of the year since 1973. So what's driving the Canadian dollar down now? Well, first of all, the Canadian economy is not in good shape. The last quarter, we saw a GDP print of negative 1.6%, which is not good. The Canadian economy before that was not strong, and we're seeing the impact of tariffs start to also compound the effects. But there are a couple of variables you do want to follow in the market, which substantially affect the price of the Canadian dollar. The first one is the price of oil. As the price of oil goes down, it tends to put downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. And the second one is the differential yield between the 2-year government bond in the US and Canada. When the 2-year yield goes down faster in Canada than the US, that puts downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. And if we take a look since June, we've seen the price of oil moving down, putting downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. And more recently, we've seen the 2-year yield in Canada decrease faster than the US, putting downward pressure on the Canadian dollar once again. So how bad is this? Well, if we take a look, the US dollar still hasn't been doing well relative to world currencies. It's actually been moving lower, but the US dollar has been moving higher relative to the Canadian dollar. So this really is a made in Canada problem at this point. Now, can we see further weakness? Yes, we can, because if we take a look at the seasonal trends for the Canadian dollar, they're not strong at this time. If we take a look at the seasonal month graph here, we can see that October and November tend to be two of the weakest months of the year on an average and median basis. If we take a look at a heat map, we can see that this trend has been consistent over time, particularly in recent years. We see more blue, which is negative, showing that the Canadian dollar has been weak in this time period.